Let's go. Right. Here we go now. Batman scoop on the mic. Mixing the mix on the wheels of steel. This is what I was fucking born to do. Let's go.
Yo! Hey!
One, two.
What's up, you froze? What's up, Punch? What's up, Silky? Punch, you're awake? Weren't you up super late last night? Kinduff, Eam Live, Not X0, Silly Goose Survivor. Good to see you all. Hardy 6000, Crane, Hennepin, Warden here, Haliox, Simon Nation, December's truly Big Lord Kahuna, Sandwich Joe. Good to see you, good to see you, good to see you. What up, Brandon? How are you? I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Let me get this open.
1, 2.
Put a little timer. There's like 14 minutes till the conference. They did already announce the cut, but we get to hear them talk, which is more important. About like this. 13 minutes. Da-da-da. Ba-da-da.
From the top, let's go.
Hey, Big A! I just got out of the career fair and I asked the people at the Raytheon booth if they knew the Low W Master. Needless to say, I got the job. My dad? You said they asked if they knew my dad? That's good. Hey, Atrioc, I suggested the chili dog stream where you eat a bunch of chili dogs in a messy way. Have you thought about it? No. I timed you out. I timed you out. It's FOMC day, bro. Keep that glizzy shit down. Ron Levette, thank you for the 13 months. Atrioc, my girlfriend is a lawyer in Vancouver, and they recently doubled the days at the court that are dedicated to foreclosures. It's bad up here. No, it's fine. No, I heard it's fine. I heard on Reddit it's fine. No, I heard it's all good, bro. Don't worry. Don't you worry! Boop, boop. Boop, 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 boop. What is FOMC? It's the Federal Open Market Committee. It's where Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve announces cuts to interest rates and explains why, which we're going to watch. It goes live here in 12 minutes. I'll explain what the fuck it is and why it's important in the next 10, but give me a minute. Although I don't know, like, where do they fucking actually stream this shit? Where do they actually stream this? Like, do they have a Twitch channel? Bro, if I hear one more chatter come here and try to scoop me on the fucking thing, I'm gonna kill myself. I get it. I'm aware. You think I'm not aware? Shut the fuck up. God damn, dude. Holy fuck. You're so lame. Me and Jerome tight. Hey, happy 1 year. Happy 83T. Happy 1 year. Oh, Carter Turbo, thank you for the link. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Ooh, they have fucking elevator music too. Check this out, folks. Five. Okay, we'll let this play for a second. We got 10 minutes. Let me give you a quick breakdown. I kind of talked about it yesterday, but we'll go through it any Hootie and the Blowfish, okay? Today is the Federal Open Market Committee announcement on rate cuts. Sounds pretty boring, right? You probably don't care. But let me catch you up, okay? Let me catch you up on why this could be important. I'm pulling up my charts here for a second. I just want you guys to be able to see everything. Okay. Does this show? It does, but it looks terrible. 1 second. Okay. This is United States government interest rates. Okay? Interest rates is the cost of borrowing money. You know how when you take out a loan for a car and you have an interest rate, and that's how big your payment is, or a mortgage for a house or a credit card. Okay? Well, this is the cost of money from the government lending to banks lending to other banks. So everything is that you borrow is above this line. So what the government sets is important. Okay? So if they set, for example, the interest rate at 5.5%, which is what it is now, then if you're going to borrow money for a house, it'll be at 6 or 7 or 8, which is what it is. Okay? It'll be above that. So this is an important number. And for the longest time, it was at 0%. Basically free to borrow money. Everything was really cheap. And that's very good to juice the economy. Okay? But when the economy gets too hot and we start getting inflation, they have to raise this number to slow things down. And recently, after 2021 inflation, they raised it the most and fastest I feel like I've ever seen. This is, again, really high, really fast. And then Jerome Powell kept saying, higher for longer. Jerome Powell's our chairman of the Federal Reserve. He said, higher for longer. We're going to keep it up here until inflation has been beaten. As of today, they've decided they've beaten it. And they need to start cutting again to bring it down, to make things cheaper to borrow. Okay? And the big question of today, going into today, again, was whether they would cut by a little bit, 0.25, go from, this is 5.5 to 5.25, or cut by a jumbo, which is 0.5. It'll go down here. It'll go down right here. Okay? 0.5. That was the big idea. 0.25 or 0.5. It's been announced. It's 0.5. Okay? But we're going to find out why. They're going to announce in the call. We're going to talk about in the call. Okay? The main question is, the reason they would do one of these, and again, prior to last night, if you go to last night, this is the most divided the probability has ever been going into a rate cut. People were split almost dead even on whether or not they would cut 0.5 or 0.25. They were like, because let me explain what the difference is. Okay, let me make sure you understand. So, and this is extrapolating, but the idea is if they cut a small amount, they're saying, hey, things are good. We're just slowly easing back down now that inflation has been beaten. 0.25 would be the normal response. It would be, hey, there's an election coming up. We're not trying to fuck with anything. 0.25. 0.5 is saying, through their actions, if not their words, hey, shit is a little bit more stressed than we may have let on. 0.5 is like, hey, we need to make it cheaper to borrow quick. We might be too late. 0.5 is kind of like the oh shit button, if you understand. Now, again, they're both relatively similar. You can make arguments either way. I'm sure they're going to be very calming in this presentation. But if it had been 0.75, the markets would have freaked out. That's full-on panic. Okay? So it's the fact that it's closer to big than small is like, hey, something in our data is telling us there's a problem. We need to fix it. Okay? So 0.5 is what I predicted yesterday. Based on everything I've been saying, 0.5 makes more reasonable sense. And that's what they've done today. They've announced 0.5. Now he's going to explain why in the call in 5 minutes, and we're going to watch it and we're going to hear the opinions, and maybe he's going to make it all seem fine. But I want you to understand that was the expectation going in. And it's important here because it's been a long time since they've cut rates. And it may all seem like it blew by to you because it's been, everything's a flash since COVID. But this period right here, like after they hit the peak in, early 23 until now, that's like, how many months? 14 months? It's like 400 something days. That's actually relatively super long. The last time we waited that long to cut was 2007. Okay? Usually they cut pretty quick. So they've been holding it higher for longer, really long. And usually when you hold it that high for that long, things start to break because people can't handle the strain of high rates. For example, auto loans completely plummeting. Ally Financial said consumers are struggling to pay back their car loans. Because the car loans are so expensive, people cannot pay them back. And so there's signs in the economy that rates have been high for so long that it's starting to break people's access to credit, ability to pay their bills, and the impacts are going to start to be felt. And if the Federal Reserve is behind the curve, if they're too late, they're going to have to cut really, really fucking fast to try and fix this problem. And 0.5 indicates that's what they might be doing. And we don't know. We're going to listen to them talk, but that's the idea. I want to give you some idea of there's been some stress with the higher rates to combat inflation. Usually something will break. Nothing is officially broken yet, but it feels like we're on the edge. We already know the answer is 0.5, but it's so funny. Like it was the most contentious gambling into the rate cut ever. People were split basically 50-50 on 0.25 or 0.5. And that reflects what we've been seeing in the market. If you guys have been seeing the stock market, it's like big dip, big rise, big dip, big rise. And it's like people can't there's like two arguments going on over whether things are good or bad. Over whether we need a big rate cut or not. It's like there's a real butting heads going on with money, with investments, and so if 0.5 is so bad, why did SPY jump during its announcement? It always does. I'm so glad you asked that. It's a great question. Why don't we pull up some headlines? Wait. Here we go. Is that what you're talking about? Stock surge on big rate cut, right? You're right. No, they did. Just don't check the date. Just don't check the date. Just please don't check the date. September 19th. It's the exact same day, actually, but it's just 15 years ago. No, they always do. If you go back to 2001, if you go back to 90, if you go back to, they always, when the cut first starts, the stocks always surge. Okay? Because it's a sign that, oh, they're listening. Things are all going to be better now. Now, they still might be. History just rhymes, not the same thing. But what I'm saying is like, the predictable function here is that they make a big rate cut, a half point size, like what they did in September 2007. I mean, it's crazy. It's the same day. And everything surges. And then later people realize it wasn't enough. They weren't fast enough. So we're going to find out. But it's going to be interesting to hear Jerome Powell speak today and hear what his thoughts are on why they had to cut and why everything's okay. Today's the 18th. The cut in this example was on the 18th. This article is from the 19th, the day after. That's why they say easing Tuesday. Do you understand? Are you following me? Do I have to go slower? Okay, now let's pull up. Let's pull it up. Should be starting like right fucking now. Ooh, in these trying times, I'll give you a move. Oh, he's starting. Let's go. I always watch these by myself, fucking shirtless. So it'll be good to watch it with chat. All right, Jerome. Tell us it's all okay, buddy. Boy, you better not be late. Isn't that a fucking concert, bro? You're not Kanye West. Yeah! Yeah!
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people.
Great.
Our economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years.
Great.
The labor market has cooled from its formerly overheated state. Inflation has eased substantially from a peak of 7% to an estimated 2.2% as of August.
Great.
We're committed to maintaining our economy's strength by supporting maximum employment and returning inflation to our 2% goal.
Okay.
Today, the Federal Open Market Committee decided to reduce the degree of policy restraint by lowering our policy interest rate by a half percentage point. This
Jumbo
decision
rate
reflects
cut!
our growing confidence that with an appropriate recalibration of our policy stance, strength in the labor market can be maintained in a context of moderate growth and inflation moving sustainably down to 2%. We also decided to continue to reduce our securities holdings. I will have
Quantitative
more to
tightening?
say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments.
Okay, what are the developments? The best
Recent
part is the
indicators
questions, the
suggest
Q&A
that
at the end.
economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. GDP rose at an annual rate of 2.2% in the first half of the year,
Beast.
and available data point to a roughly similar pace of growth this quarter. Growth of consumer spending has remained resilient, and investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from its anemic pace last year. In the housing sector, investment fell back in the second quarter after rising strongly in the first. Improving supply conditions have supported resilient demand and the strong performance of the U.S. economy over the past year. In our summary of economic projections, committee participants generally expect GDP growth to remain solid, with a median projection
That's
of
great.
2% over the next few years.
Silk Song,
In the
please.
labor market, conditions have continued to cool. Payroll job gains averaged 116,000 per month over the past 3 months, a notable step down from the pace seen earlier in the year. The
It's fine,
unemployment
though.
rate has moved up, but remains low at 4.2%. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs-to-workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a broad set of indicators suggest that conditions in the labor market are now less tight than just before the pandemic in 2019.
Great.
The labor
And they'll stop
market is
there.
not a source of elevated inflationary pressures. The median projection
Why are
for
the
the
graphs so
unemployment
ugly?
rate in the SEP is 4.4% at the end of this year, 0.4 higher than projected in June.
If he says Silk Song,
Inflation has eased notably over the past 2 years, but remains above our longer-run goal of 2%.
then why are you cutting?
Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices
What happened to
rose
higher for longer until we break the
2.2%
back
over the 12
of
months ending
inflation?
in August, and that excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.7%. Longer-term inflation expectations appear
for
to
the Q&A.
remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 2.3% this year and 2.1% next year, somewhat lower than projected in June.
That'd be great.
Thereafter, the median projection is 2%. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. For much of the past 3 years, inflation ran well above our 2% goal,
Yes.
and labor market conditions were extremely tight.
Yes.
Our primary focus had been on bringing down inflation, and appropriately so.
Great.
We are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials,
Yeah,
like
we can't
food,
afford Taco Bell.
housing, and transportation. Our restrictive monetary policy has helped restore
can't
the
afford
balance
Taco Bell,
between
dude.
aggregate supply and demand, easing
Look at the price
inflationary
increases.
pressures and ensuring that
We can't
inflation
afford Taco Bell,
expectations
bro.
remain well anchored. Our patient approach over the past year has paid dividends. Inflation is now much closer to our objective, and we have gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. As inflation has declined and the labor market has cooled, the upside risks to inflation have diminished and the downside risks to employment have increased. We now see the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals as roughly in balance. And we are attentive to the risks to both sides of our dual mandate. In light of the progress on inflation and the balance of risks, at
So you're
today's
fucked
meeting,
either
the
way.
committee decided to lower the target range for the federal funds rate by a half percentage point to 4.75% to 5%. This recalibration of our policy stance will help maintain the strength of the economy and the labor market, and will continue to enable further progress on inflation as we begin the process of moving toward a more neutral stance. We are not on any preset course. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting. We know that reducing policy restraint too quickly could hinder progress on inflation.
Yeah.
At the same time, reducing restraint too slowly could unduly weaken economic activity and employment.
He's saying it.
In
He's saying we're
considering additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will carefully
Bro,
assess
he's
incoming
saying if we
data,
cut too
the evolving
fast,
outlook, and the balance of
we're going to get
risks.
fucking massive inflation. If
In
we
our
cut too
SEP,
slow,
FOMC
job losses are going to
participants
rise
wrote
in
down
the
their
fucking
individual
millions, and
assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate.
and you got to fucking
based
thread
on
that
what
needle,
each
bro.
participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward.
At least
If
he's
the
aware.
economy evolves as expected, the median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 4.4% at the end of this year and 3.4% at the end of 2025. These median projections are lower than in June, consistent with the projections for lower inflation and higher unemployment,
absolutely be lower
as
than
well
that.
as the changed
Absolutely
balance
be
of
lower than
risks. These projections, however, are not a committee plan or decision. As the economy evolves, monetary policy will adjust in order to best promote our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains solid and inflation persists, we can dial back policy
Their
restraint
0.5
more
cut in
slowly.
December, that's what they're implying, yeah.
If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we are prepared to respond. Policy is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face in pursuing both sides of our dual mandate. The Fed has been assigned two goals for monetary policy:
Yeah. You mentioned
maximum
it.
employment.
Dude, you
and
mentioned it a
stable
million
prices.
times. Dual mandate, we get
remain
it.
committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation back
Bro,
down
he's
to our
repeating the
2%
same
goal,
line. I get
and
it. You got
keeping
two mandates.
longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country.
They do indeed.
Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Great. Here's the question. Okay. It's not that long.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking our questions. In July, you said you weren't necessarily thinking about a 50. You didn't want to be specific, but you said you were thinking about a 50. The inflation data last week came out a little firmer than expected. Retail was strong, third quarter GDP running 3%. So what changed and made the committee go 50, and how do you respond to the concerns that
Great
shows
question.
the Fed is more concerned about the labor market? And
Great
I guess,
question.
should we expect more 50s in the months ahead? And based on what should we make that call? Thank you.
Thanks, Peter Griffin.
So, okay, a lot of questions in there. Let me jump in. Since the last meeting, we have had a lot of data come in. We've had the two employment reports, July and August.
Yeah.
We've also had two inflation reports, including one that came in during blackout. We had the QCEW report, which suggests that suggests that the payroll report numbers that we're getting may be artificially high and will be revised down. You
Yeah,
know
they
that.
will. They
We've
will.
also seen anecdotal data like the Beige Book. And so we took all of those,
Okay.
and we went into blackout and we thought about what to do, and we concluded that this was the right thing for the economy, for the people that we serve. And
So you
that's,
looked at all the
that's how we made our
employment data and
decision.
realized you have to cut
So
fucking
that's
fast.
one question.
Interesting.
What was the second and
How
third?
do we make sorry, thank you, sir. How do we figure out in the months ahead, is there another 25 or 50 coming in? Based
Sure.
on what shall we make that call? Thank you.
Sure. So, a couple things. A good place to start is the SEP. But let me start with what I said, which was that we're going to be making decisions meeting by meeting, based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, the balance of risks. If you look at the SEP, you'll see that it's a process of recalibrating our policy stance away from where we had it a year ago when inflation was high and unemployment low, to a place that's more appropriate given where we are now and where we expect to be. And that process will take place over time.
Sure.
There's nothing in the SEP that suggests the committee is in a rush to get this done. This process evolves over time. Of
You're
course,
starting with a
that's a
jumbo,
projection.
bro.
That's a baseline projection. We know, as I mentioned in my remarks, that the actual things that we do will depend on the way the economy evolves. We can go quicker if that's appropriate. We can go slower if that's appropriate. We can pause if that's appropriate. But that's what we were contemplating. Again, I would point you to the SEP as just an assessment of where of what the committee is thinking today, what the individual members, rather, of the committee are thinking today, assuming that their particular forecasts are realized.
Go to Chris.
Hi, Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. Thank you. The projections show that the Fed officials expect the Fed funds rate to still be above their estimate of long-run neutral by the end of next year. So does that suggest you see rates as restrictive for that entire period? Does that threaten the weakening of the job market that you said you'd like to avoid? Or does it suggest
no
that maybe people see the
But
short
the
run
rates
neutral
are
as a
still
little
that
bit
high
higher?
in a year.
Then-
No way.
Thank you.
I think the way I would really characterize it is this. I think people write down their estimate, individuals do. I think every single person on the committee, if you ask them what's your level of certainty around that, they would say there's a wide range where that could fall. So I think we
Ask
don't
him
know.
about
There
Skibbity
are
Toilet. That's
model-based
coming up.
approaches and
Someone always asks about
empirically based
Skibbity Toilet,
approaches
and
that
he has a funny
estimate
little dance.
what the
Be
neutral
ready.
rate will be at any
Zoomers,
given
don't
time.
worry if you're brain
But
rotted. He's going to do a
realistically,
Skibbity
we know
Toilet
it by
thing
its
here in just a
works.
second.
So
I'm sure.
that leaves us in a place where we expect, in the base case, to be continuing to remove restriction, and we'll be looking at the way the economy reacts to that, and that'll be guiding us in our thinking about the question that we're asking at every meeting, which is our policy stance the appropriate one? We know, if you go back, we know that the policy stance we adopted in July of 2023 came at a time when unemployment was 3.5% and inflation was 4.2%. Today, unemployment is up to 4.2%. Inflation's down to a few tenths above 2.
Unemployment's rising,
So we know
inflation
that
is
it is
weaker.
time to recalibrate our policy to something that is
But you haven't
more
beaten
appropriate
inflation.
given the progress on inflation and on employment, moving to a more sustainable level, so that the balance of risks are now even. And this is the beginning of that process. I mentioned the direction of which is toward a sense of neutral. And we'll move as fast or as slow as we think is appropriate in real time. What you have is our individual accumulation of individual estimates of what that will be in the base case.
Howard?
Howard Schneider with Reuters. How close was this in terms of the decision? You do have the first dissent by a governor since 2005, I think. Was the weight clearly in favor of a 50, or was this a very close decision?
I think we had a good discussion.
They argued.
If you go back, I talked about this in
Okay.
Jackson Hole, but I didn't address.
I can fucking mute for a second. Like, it's not just him making the call. It's like all the Fed governors, right? And they had a meeting. They clearly had a fucking barn burner over whether it should be 0.25 or 0.5, whether it should go slow or fast, do a small one or a jumbo. And they landed on a jumbo. So it's interesting to know why.
18 of the participants wrote.
He's saying it in a roundabout way, but what he's basically saying is like unemployment is rising. And although we haven't beaten inflation, we've gotten it down to a lower level. And at that point, we have to worry more about unemployment. So we're going to cut. We're going to cut, and we're cutting fast. That's what he's saying. And I think that's a fair thing to say, but I think it's understating the now impossible task they find themselves with.
Follow up to that. now that this is in the books, can you give us some guidance as sort of follow up to Steve on the pacing here? Would you expect this to be running every other meeting once we get into next year? For
Yeah,
example?
we're going to take it meeting by meeting. As I mentioned, there's no sense that the committee feels it's in a rush to do.
This is the boring part of these conversations. I mean, for some of you, this is all boring, but this part is where people try to suss out when the next cut is going to be and what's going to be. He can never answer that and always has to fucking say no. It's so annoying. The reporters all try to figure out, like, okay, so when's the next one, or what's the, and then he has to go, we'll go meeting by meeting. We don't know, because obviously they need to maintain their ability to surprise people. If everyone knows exactly what's happening ahead of time, then that all gets priced in. So,
Gina.
Hi, Chair Powell. Gina Smilik with the New York Times. Thanks for taking our questions. You and your colleagues in your economic projections today see the unemployment rate climbing to 4.4% and staying there. Obviously, historically, when the unemployment rate climbs that much over a relatively short period of time, it doesn't typically just stop. It continues increasing. I wonder if you can walk us through why you see the labor market stabilizing, sort of what's the mechanism there, and what do you see as the
great
risks?
question. Fantastic question.
So, again, the labor market is actually in solid condition.
Oh, yeah?
And our intention with our policy move today is to keep it there. You can say that about the whole economy. The U.S. economy is in good shape. It's growing at a solid pace. Inflation is
Someone
coming
please
down.
clip this. I just
The
wanna have
labor
the
market
clip
is in a
just in
strong
case.
pace. We want
just
to keep
wanna have
it
the
there.
clip, just in case.
That's what we're doing.
That was not an answer to her question. Great question, lady. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. That was a good question.
Nick Timmeros of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, does today's action constitute a
These guys are like
catch-up
best friends.
in action given recent
Nick
substantial
Timmeros and Jerome
revisions to
Powell
the
are like
employment data? Or is this larger than typical rate cut a function of the elevated nominal level of the policy rate such that an accelerated cadence could be expected to continue?
Okay. Multiple questions there, but so I would say we don't think we're behind. We do not think we think this is timely, but I
Okay.
think you can take this as a sign of our commitment not to get behind. So it's a strong move. Sorry, your other question was?
Well, is this about what happened in the employment data between this meeting and the last meeting, or is this about the level of the funds rate, the high nominal level of the funds rate relative to what might be expected if you're trying to maintain equilibrium?
So
Bro's
I
asking
think
a
it's
chat
about-
GPT question.
We come into this with
Bro's
the
reading
policy
off his
position that
paper,
was
a
put in
chat
place, as
GPT
you know.
question.
I mentioned
Come on,
in
bro.
July of 2023, which was a time of high inflation and very low unemployment. We've been very patient about reducing the policy rate. We've waited. Other central banks around the world have cut, many of them several times. We've waited, and I think that patience has really paid dividends in the form of our confidence that inflation is moving sustainably down to 2%. So I think that is what enables us to
I
take
agree.
this
I
strong
think,
move today. I do not think that anyone should look at this and say, oh, this is the new pace. You have to think about it in terms of the base case. Of course, what happens will happen. So in the base case, what you see is, look at the SEP. You see cuts moving along. The sense of this is we're recalibrating policy down over time to
Just trying to make
a
sure
more
nobody
neutral level.
front-runs it.
And
they will
we're
anyway.
moving at the pace that we think is appropriate given developments in the economy in the
Just trying
base
to say,
case.
don't price in a bunch more
The
cuts.
economy can develop in a way that would cause us to go faster or slower, but that's what the base case says.
And if I could follow up on the balance sheet. In 2019, when you did the mid-cycle adjustment, you ceased the balance sheet runoff. With a larger cut today, should there be any signal inferred about how the committee would approach
This is about quantitative
end
easing.
state on the balance sheet policy?
So in the current situation, reserves have really been stable. They haven't come down. So reserves are still abundant and expected to remain so for some time. As you know, the shrinkage in our balance sheet has really come out of the overnight RRP. So I think what that tells you is we're not thinking about stopping runoff because of this at all. We know that these two things can happen side by side. In a sense, they're both a form of normalization. And so for a time, you can have the balance sheet shrinking, but also be cutting rates.
Colby.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the Financial Times. Just following up on Gina's question on rising unemployment, is it your view that this is just a function of a normalizing labor market amid improved supply, or is there anything to suggest that something more concerning perhaps is taking place here, given that other metrics of labor demand have softened too?
You're asking good questions.
And I guess in
Let's
direct
go,
follow-up to
ladies.
Gina is, why should we not expect a further deterioration in labor market conditions?
Yeah, just fucking
if
point
policy
blank.
is still restrictive?
So
Why
I
the
think what we're
fuck?
seeing is clearly labor
Also,
market
Financial
conditions have
Times,
cooled
good
off by any measure, as I talked about in Jackson Hole. And, but they're still at a level. The level of those conditions is actually pretty close to what I would call maximum employment.
Right.
You know, so
And
you're
they're
close
asking,
to mandate, maybe at mandate.
Isn't it going
on-
to keep
on
getting
that.
worse? I
So
understand
what's
where it is
driving
right
it?
now, Jerome Powell. They're asking you a different question.
Clearly, payroll job creation has moved down over the last few months, and this bears watching. Meant by many other measures, the labor market has returned to or below 2019 levels, which was a very good, strong labor market, but this is more sort of 2018, 17. So the labor market bears close watching, and we'll be giving it that. But ultimately, we believe,
But don't panic.
with an appropriate recalibration of our policy, that we can continue to see the economy growing, and that will support the labor market. In the meantime, if you look at the growth in economic activity data, the retail sales data that we just got, second quarter GDP, all of this indicates an economy that is still growing at a solid pace.
GDP is a lagging
So that
indicator.
should also support the labor market over
You
time.
know that.
So, but again, it
Don't
bears
bullshit a
watching, and we're
bullshitter.
watching.
And just on the point about starting to see rising layoffs, if that were to happen, wouldn't the committee already be too late in terms of avoiding a recession?
So that's, our plan, of course, has been to begin to recalibrate.
girl's a
and
queen.
As you know, we're not seeing rising claims. We're not seeing
They never
rising
ask hard
layoffs. We're not
questions of these
seeing that, and
things.
we're not hearing that from companies, that's something that's getting ready to happen. So we're not waiting for that. Because, there is thinking that the time to support the labor market is when it's strong, and not when you begin to see the layoffs. There's some lore on that. So that's the situation we're in. We have, in fact, begun the cutting cycle now, and we'll be watching, and that'll be one of the factors that we consider. Of course, we're going to look at the totality of the data as we make these decisions meeting by meeting.
Great.
Michael McKee with Bloomberg TV and Radio. To follow up on that, what would constitute for you and the committee a deterioration in the labor market?
Damn,
You're
everybody's
pricing
asking
in,
about labor.
Basically, by the end of next year, 200 basis points of cuts.
Damn,
just to
everybody's like,
maintain
hey,
a
no,
higher
seriously, for
unemployment
real
rate.
though, job losses
Would
are
you be
rising.
moving
Can we
to
talk
a
about
more
that for real?
preemptive monetary policy style, rather than as you did with inflation,
Damn, they were
waiting
asking
until
softballs
the
and then
data gave you a
she
signal?
opened the floodgate.
No, we're going to be watching all of the data, right? So if as I mentioned in my
Got the same
remarks, if
answer
the
every
labor
time.
market were to slow unexpectedly, then
Unexpectedly.
we have the ability to react to that by cutting faster. We're also going to be looking at our other mandate, though. We have greater confidence now that inflation is moving down to 2%, but at the same time, our plan is that we will be at 2%, over time. So, and policy, we think, is still restrictive, so that should still be happening.
Rocking a hard place, Jerome.
How sensitive you'll be to the labor market, since you forecast we are going to see higher unemployment, and it is going to take a significant amount of monetary easing to just maintain it.
So, what I would say is we don't think we need to see further loosening in labor market conditions to get inflation down to 2%. But we have a dual mandate, and
Yeah, I heard.
I think you can take
I've
this-
heard about the
this
dual
whole
mandate,
action
JP.
Take a step back. What have we been trying to achieve? We're trying to
long
achieve
as
a
the Q&A,
situation
not that
where
long.
we restore price
Almost over.
stability without the kind of painful increase
Heard,
in
Jeff.
unemployment that has come sometimes with disinflation. That's what we're trying to do. And I think you can take today's action as a sign of our strong commitment to achieve that goal.
Rachel.
Hi, Chair Powell. Rachel Siegel from the Washington Post. Thanks for
Unemployment,
taking
one more
our
time.
questions. You're describing this view that you don't think you're behind when it comes to the job market. Can you walk us through the specific data points that you found to be most helpful in the discussions at
keep
this
hammering
meeting?
him.
You mentioned a couple,
They
but
just
would you
keep
be able to walk
hammering
us
him.
through what that dashboard told you as far as what you know about the job market now?
Sure. So we'll start with unemployment, which is the single most important one probably. You're at 4.2%. That's, I know that's higher than we were used to seeing numbers in the mid and even below mid threes last year. But if you look back over the sweep of the years, that's a very healthy unemployment rate.
For
And
sure.
anything in the low
But what we're
fours
asking you
is a really
will it
is a
continue
good
going
labor
up
market.
as
So
signs seem to
that's
see?
one thing. Participation is at high levels. It's we're adjusted for demographics, for aging. Participation's at pretty high levels. That's a good thing. Wages are still a bit above what would be their wage increases, rather, are still just a bit above where they would be over the very longer term to be consistent with 2% inflation, but they're very much coming down to what that sustainable level is, so we feel good about that. Vacancies over, per unemployed is back to what is still a very strong level. It's not as high as it was. That number reached 2 to 1, 2 vacancies for every unemployed person. As measured, it's now below around 1, but that's still a very good number, I would say. Quits have come back down to normal levels. I mean, that could go on and on. There are many employment indicators. What do they say? They say this is still a solid labor market. The question isn't the level. The question is that there has been change particularly over the last few months. And so what we say is as the risks, the upside risks to inflation have really come down, the downside risks to employment have increased. And because we have been patient and held our fire on cutting while inflation has come down, I think we're now in a very good position to manage the risks to both of our goals.
Great.
And what do you expect to learn between now and November that will help inform the scale of the cut at the next meeting?
More data, the usual. Don't look for anything else. We'll see another labor report. We'll see another jobs report. I think we get a second jobs report on the day of the meeting, I think. No, on the Friday before the meeting. And inflation data. We'll get all this data. We'll be watching. It's always a question of look at the incoming data and ask what are the implications of that data for the evolving outlook and the balance of risks, and then go through our process and think what's the right thing to do. Is policy where we want it to be to foster the achievement of our goals over time? So that's what it is, and that's what we'll be doing.
He's in a loop now. Wrap it.
Thanks. Hi, Chair Powell. Neil Irwin with Axios. We've only been running a little above 100,000 jobs a month on payrolls the last 3 months. Do you view that level of job creation as worrying or alarming, or would you be content if we were to kind of stick at that level?
Every single question
And relatedly,
is like, bro,
one of the
you're
welcome
not
trends of the
talking
last couple of
about
years
job
has been labor market steam coming out through
so
job
funny.
openings falling rather than job losses. Do you think that trend has further to
we're
run,
seeing
or
it
do you see
all over,
risk
and you're
that further
not-
labor market cooling will have to come through job losses?
So on the job creation, it depends on the inflows, right? So if you're having millions of people come into the labor force, and you're creating 100,000 jobs, you're going to see unemployment go up. So it really depends on what's the trend underlying the volatility of people coming into the country. We understand there's been quite an influx across the borders, and that has actually been one of the things that's allowed unemployment rate to rise. And the other thing is just the slower hiring rate, which is something we also watch carefully. So it does
It's the
depend on
immigrants driving up our unemployment
what's
rate.
happening on the supply side. And on the beverage curve question, yes. So
The
we
economy's
all
great.
felt
There's just
on the
so many
committee,
unemployed
not all, but
immigrants.
I think everyone on the committee felt that job openings were so elevated that they could fall a long way before you hit the part of the curve where job openings turned into higher unemployment, job loss. And yes, I think we are. It's hard to know that you can't know these things with great precision, but certainly it appears that we're very close to that point, if not at it, so that further declines in job openings will translate more directly into unemployment. But it's been a great ride down. I mean, we've seen a lot of tightness come out of the labor market in that form.
I'm sure it's a great ride for you, bro.
It
I don't
resulting
know if it's a
in,
great ride for
lower
the
employment.
fucking Gen Z graduate.
Thanks, Chair Powell.
Look at
Edward
getting his
Lawrence,
offer
Fox
rescinded.
Business. So we've heard some speculation that you may be going with the federal funds rate to 3.5, maybe under 4%. And there's basically an entire generation that has experienced zero or near zero federal funds rate. Now, some think we're heading in that direction again. What's the likelihood that cheap money is now the norm?
So this is a question, you mean after we get through all of this? It's just a great question that we can only speculate about. Intuitively, many people anyway would say we're probably not going back to that era where there were trillions of dollars of sovereign bonds trading at negative rates, long-term bonds trading at negative rates. And it looked like the neutral rate might even be negative. So people were issuing debt at negative rates. It seems that's so far away now.
I want to see it in 10 years.
My own sense is that we're not going back to that. But honestly, we're going to find out. But it feels to me and that the neutral rate is probably significantly higher than it was back then. How high is it? I just don't think we know. We only know it by its works.
And one more, how do you respond to the criticism that will likely come that a deeper rate cut now before the election has some political motivations?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, so this is my fourth presidential election at the Fed, and it's always the same. We're always going into this meeting in particular and asking what's the right thing to do for the people we serve, and we do that, and we make a decision as a group. And then we announce it, and that's always what it is. It's never about anything else. Nothing else is discussed. And I would also point out that the things that we do really affect economic conditions for the most part with a lag. So nonetheless, this is what we do. Our job is to support the economy on behalf of the American people.
Damn right they do.
And if we get it right, this will benefit the American people significantly. So this really concentrates the mind, and it's something we all take very, very seriously. We don't put up any other filters. I think if you start doing that, I don't know where you stop. And so we just don't do that.
No, I agree with him. I think that's a perfect answer. I don't think they're political with this choice. I think it's a response to deteriorating labor markets.
I'm Jolene Kent with CBS News.
He's being cagey on.
My first question is, very simply, what message are you trying to send American consumers, the American people, with this unusually large rate cut?
Yeah.
I would just say that, the U.S. economy is in a good place, and our
that's the signal you're sending with this emergency large rate cut?
More specifically,
things
the
are
economy
so
is
good we
growing
have
at a
to cut
solid
extra
pace.
big?
Inflation is coming down closer to our 2% objective
That's
over
your
time.
message.
And the labor market
We're
is
cutting
still
extra
in
big
solid
because
shape.
it's extra
So
good.
our intention is really to maintain the strength that we
just keep
currently
saying
see
dual
in the
mandate
U.S.
as a
economy.
way out of everything.
And we'll do that by returning rates from their high level, which has really been the purpose of which has been to get inflation under control.
Yep.
We're going to move those down over time to a more normal level.
Well, why so quickly, Jerome? That's what they're
over
asking
time.
you. You're saying, slowly over time. Why are you doing it so
Listening
quickly?
to you talk about inflation moving meaningfully down to 2%, is the Federal Reserve effectively declaring a decisive victory over inflation and rising prices?
Yeah. Is it over?
No, we're not. So inflation, what we say is we want inflation, the goal is to have inflation move down to 2% on a sustainable basis.
Yeah.
And, we're not really, we're close, but we're not really at 2%. And I think we're going to want to see it be, around 2%
these
and
journalists
close to 2%
are
for some time.
doing old white
But,
guys a
We're
disservice.
certainly not.
Okay?
We're not.
Why are all the
saying
women who are
mission accomplished or anything
younger
like that? But I
having
have
all
to
the good
say, though,
questions?
we're encouraged by the
Why are the
progress that
old
we
white
have
guys
made.
fucking choking in the bag? It's a discredit to me.
Hi, Katerina Saraiva with Bloomberg News. I just would love to know kind of how the committee is thinking about the persistence we've seen in housing inflation. Do you think you can return to 2% with housing inflation where it is? Yeah.
So housing inflation is the one piece that is kind of dragging a bit, if I can say.
You could say.
We know that market rents are doing what we would want them to do, which is to be moving up at relatively low levels, but they're not rolling over. The leases that are rolling over are not coming down as much, and OER is coming in high. So, it's been slower than we expected. I think we now understand that it's going to take some time for those lower market rents to get into this, but the direction of travel is clear, And as long as market rents remain, relatively low inflation, over time that will show up. Just the time it's taking now, several years rather than just one or two cycles of annual lease renewals. So I think we understand that now, but I don't think the outcome is in doubt. Again, as long as market rents remain under control, the outcome is not in doubt.
You understand what it's like to be a person spending
it's
two-thirds of your paycheck on a one-bedroom apartment?
Of the elements that go into core PCE inflation have behaved pretty well. They all have some volatility. We will get down to 2% inflation, I believe, and I believe that ultimately we'll get what we need to get out of the housing services piece too.
Some of your colleagues have expressed concern that with starting to cut rates, you could reignite demand in housing and see prices go up even more. What's the likelihood of that, and how would you react to that?
So the housing market, it's hard to game that out. The housing market is in part frozen because of lock-in with low rates. People don't want to sell their home, so because they have a very low mortgage, it'd be quite expensive to refinance. As rates come down, people will start to move more, and that's probably beginning to happen already. But remember, when that happens, you've got a seller, but you've also got a new buyer in many cases. So it's not, obvious how much additional demand that would make. I mean, the real issue with housing is that we have had and are on track to continue to have not enough housing. And so it's going to be challenging. It's hard to zone lots that are in places where people want to live. It's all of the aspects of housing are more and more difficult. And
area by area, bro.
Where are we going to get the supply? And this is not something that the Fed can really fix.
Texas
But
and Florida got
as we
houses.
normalize rates, you'll see the housing market normalize. And I mean, ultimately, by getting inflation broadly down and getting those rates normalized and getting the housing cycle normalized, that's the best thing we can do for householders. And then the supply question will have to be dealt with by the market and also by government.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. Just following up on some of the labor market talk earlier, monetary policy operates with long and variable lags, and I'm wondering how much you see being able to keep the unemployment rate from raising too much
They're all asking the
comes
exact same
from the
question.
fact that you're starting to act now, and that's going to give people more room to run versus just the labor market is strong. And then also, if I could, following up on Nick's question, do you see today's 50 basis point move as partially a response to the fact that you didn't cut in July, and that sort of gets you to the same place?
So you're right about lags, but I would just point to the overall economy. You have an economy that is growing at a solid pace. If you look at forecasters or talk to companies, they'll say that they think 2025 should be a good year too. So there's no sense that the U.S. economy is basically fine. If you talk to market participants, I mean, business people who are actually out there doing business. So I think our move is timely.
basically
I do,
fine
and as
if
I
you
said,
talk
you
to
can
business
see
people
our
out there doing
50
business.
basis point move as a commitment.
Give me that clip. I'll put it. That's going to be great.
To make sure that we don't fall behind. So you're really asking about
It's
your second
basically
question. You're asking
fine
about
if you
July,
talk
and
to
I guess
business people doing
if you
business.
ask, if we'd gotten the July report before the meeting, would we have cut? We might well have. We didn't make
Well, if
that
you talk to
decision,
regular
but,
people,
you know,
Jerome Powell.
we might well have. I think.
Hey, why don't you talk
that's
to?
not, that doesn't really answer the question
The
that we
share
ask
of
ourselves,
US
which is,
30-year-olds
let's
who
look,
live
you
on their
know,
own.
At this meeting, we're looking back to
way down,
the
or live with a
July
child,
employment
way
report, the
down,
August
or own a
employment
home,
report, the two
way
CPI
down,
reports,
or have ever
one of which
married,
came,
way down.
Of course, during blackout.
Talk to
and
these
all the
people,
other things
Jerome.
that I mentioned. We're looking at all of those things, and we're asking ourselves, what's the policy stance we need to move to? We knew it's clear that we clearly, literally, everyone on the committee agreed that it's time to move. It's just how fast do you go, and what do you think about the path forward? So this decision we made today had broad support on the committee, and I've discussed the path ahead.
Elizabeth. Thank you, Chair Powell. Elizabeth Schulze with ABC News. Mortgage rates have already been dropping in anticipation of this announcement. How much more should borrowers expect those rates to drop over the next year?
Very hard for me to say. That's from our standpoint. I can't really speak to mortgage rates. I will say that'll depend on how the economy evolves. Our intention, though, is we think that our policy was appropriately restrictive. We think that it's time to begin the process of
FaZe Banks does that.
recalibrating it.
You guys know that
to
FaZe
a level
Banks
that's more
sets the,
neutral rather than
global
restrictive.
mortgage
We
rate.
expect that process to take some time, as you can see in the projections that we released today. And as if
It's like one of
things
his most
work out
important
according
jobs
to that
as
forecast,
CEO of FaZe.
other rates in the economy will come down as
So
well.
it's Jerome
However,
Powell and FaZe Banks that do the big.
the rate at which those things happen will really depend on how the economy performs. We can't look a year ahead and know what the economy is
Is that why it's so bad? Yep.
What's your
Banks been
message
overcharging you,
to
bro.
households who are frustrated that home prices have still stayed so high as rates have been high? What do you say to those households?
Well, what I can say to the public is that we had a burst of inflation. Many other countries around the world had a similar burst of inflation. And when that happens, part of the answer is that we raise interest rates in order to cool the economy off, in order to reduce inflationary pressures.
Yeah.
It's not something that people experience as pleasant, but at the end, what you get is low inflation restored, price stability restored. And a good definition of price stability is that people in their daily decisions, they're not thinking about inflation anymore. That's where everyone wants to be, is back to...
That's where we are for
what's
sure,
inflation.
Jerome
You know,
Powell.
just keep it low, keep it stable. We're restoring that. So
Yeah, nobody
what
talks
we're going
about
through
it.
now,
Nah, nobody
really-
talks about it.
it restores. It
They're
will
not
benefit
thinking about
people
it.
over a long
We're
period
there,
of time.
bro.
Price stability benefits everybody over a long period of time, just by virtue of the fact that they don't have to deal with inflation. So that's what's been going on, and I think we've made real progress. We don't tell people how to think about the economy, of course, and of course people are experiencing high prices as opposed to high inflation, and we understand that's painful.
You understand it.
Greg.
Hi, Chair Powell. Greg Robb from MarketWatch.com. I was wondering if you could go through, you said just at the beginning that coming into the blackout, there was like an open thought of 25 or 50. You know, the Fed could move either 25 or 50. I would sort of argue that when we had those two last speeches by Governor Waller and New York Fed President John Williams, that they were sort of saying that maybe a gradual approach was going to win the day. I mean, I sort of want to ask a 7-part question about this, but I mean, could you talk, would you have cut rates by 50 basis points if the market had been pricing in like low odds of a 50-point move like they were last Wednesday? You know, after the CPI number came out, it was a really small probability of a 50-point cut. Does
Yeah,
that play in your consideration
so
at
weird,
all?
but-
Just talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
Why did they
We're
go
always
from
gonna try to
gradual
do,
small cuts to
what
like
we
this
think
one
is the
big
right
jumbo
thing for the
cut?
economy at that time.
Why?
That's what we'll do, and that's what we did today.
He's done with it. He's done answering the question.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Simon Rabinovich with The Economist. You've mentioned how closely you're watching the labor market, but you also noted that payroll numbers have been a little bit less reliable lately because of the big downward revisions. Does that put your focus overwhelmingly on the unemployment rate? And given the SEP projection of 4.4 basically being the peak in the cycle, would going above that be the kind of thing that would trigger another 50 basis point cut?
So we will continue to look at that broad array of labor market data, including the payroll numbers. We're not discarding those. I mean, we'll certainly look at those, but we will mentally tend to adjust them based on the QCEW adjustment, which you referred to. There isn't a bright line. It will be, the unemployment rate's very important, of course, but there isn't a single statistic or a single bright line over which that might move that would dictate one thing or another. We'll look at each meeting, we'll look at all the data on inflation, economic activity, and the labor market, and we'll make decisions about is our policy stance where it needs to be to foster over the medium term our mandate goals. Yeah, so I can't say we have a bright line in mind.
Who's the guy look like? He looks like somebody.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Matt Egan from CNN. I know that you discussed earlier how the Fed does
whatever the right thing is, and nothing else factors in. But in general, can you talk about whether or not you believe a sitting U.S. president should have a say in Fed decisions on interest rates? Because that's something that former President Trump, who obviously appointed you, has previously suggested. And I know the Fed is designed to be independent, but why? Can you tell the public why you view that so important?
Sure. So countries that are democracies around the world, countries that are sort of like the United States, all have what are called independent central banks. And the reason is that people have found over time that insulating the central bank from direct control by political authorities avoids making monetary policy in a way that favors maybe people who are in office as opposed to people who are not in office. So that's the idea, is that, and I think the data are clear that countries that have independent central banks, they get lower inflation. And so we do our work to serve all Americans. We're not serving any politician, any political figure, any cause, any issue, nothing. It's just maximum employment and price stability on behalf of all Americans. And that's how the other central banks are set up too. It's a good institutional arrangement, which has been good for the public. And I hope and strongly believe that it will continue.
Please don't give the president authority over central bank, even though they already have some soft power.
Kyle Campbell for American Banker. Thanks for taking the questions, Chair Powell. A couple regulatory developments in the past week that I want to ask you about. First, last week, Vice Chair for Supervision, Michael Barr, outlined his views for the changes to the Basel III Endgame. I'm wondering if you...
I'm going to skip this one. It's boring. Hey, Atrioc, just popped in. Does this guy have some sort of dual mandate we should be aware of? This is Stan's, by the way. I don't want to hear Stan's question. Napoleon fucking Dynamite. He hasn't mentioned it, so I don't know if he has a dual mandate. Let's see if he mentions it right now. He's laughing. Wait, I missed the
second question. So the answer to your question is that, yes, those changes were negotiated between the agencies with my support and with my involvement, with the idea that we were going to repropose the changes that Vice Chair Barr talked about, and then take comment on them. Mm-hmm. So yes, that is, that's happening with my support.
Okay. And is there a date for that?
That's not a final proposal, though. You understand? We're putting them out for comment. We're going to take comment and make appropriate changes. We don't have a calendar date for that.
As long as rates aren't zero.
And as for the other,
why does a 0.5% cut matter so much? Rates are unusually high right now, and they are cutting them. Normally, they would cut 0.25 as part of a slow, gradual process. Cutting 0.5 indicates that they think there's some urgency to it. They need to cut fast. There's some stress, as he's mentioning, in the labor market. It went jumbo. That's why it's important. That's why it's an interesting discussion. If you went back even 2 weeks, the market was largely betting 0.25. They were saying gradual, slow. The fact that it's changed is interesting. And, they're indicating further jumbo rate cuts this year. Let's get another question.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. You said earlier that the decision today reflects with appropriate recalibration strength in the labor market that can be maintained in the context of moderate growth. Even though the policy statement says you view the risks to inflation and job growth as roughly balanced. Given what you've said, though, today, I'm curious, are you more worried about the job market and growth than inflation? Are they not roughly balanced?
No, I think, and we think they are now roughly balanced. So if you go back for a long time, the risks were on inflation. We had a historically tight labor market, historically tight. There was a severe labor shortage. So very hot labor market, and we had inflation way above target. So, that said to us, concentrate on inflation, and we did for a while, and we kept at that. The stance that we put in place 14 months ago was a stance that was focused on bringing down inflation. Part of bringing down inflation, though, is cooling off the economy and a little bit cooling off the labor market. You now have a cooler labor market in part because of our activities. So what that tells you is it's time to change our stance. So we did that. the sense of the change in the stance is that we're recalibrating
sure
our policy
that
over
you were
time
right on
to
time.
a stance that will be more
not
neutral.
late.
And today was, I think, we made a good, strong start on that. I think it was the right decision, and I think it should send a signal that that we're committed to coming up with a good outcome here.
Is the economy more vulnerable to a shock now that could tip it into recession?
I don't think so. I don't, as I look, well, let me look at it this way. I don't see anything in the economy
He is
right
not
now
happy that she's saying the word
suggests
recession.
that the likelihood of of a downturn is
He
elevated.
didn't want to say it. He didn't want to say it.
Okay, I
He
don't see
switches
that.
it downturn.
You
They
see-
hate
you see
saying the word
growth
recession.
at a solid
They
rate.
hate saying it.
You see
Oh,
inflation
they
coming
never
down. You see
say
a labor
recession,
market
bro.
that's still
That's
at
so
very
funny.
solid levels.
She got her to
I don't
say
really
it.
see that. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Is he leaving? Fucking, what a knockout punch of a question. Oh, my queen. I'm so glad you asked that. Ooh. So I've watched a lot of these. That was not a good one. Bro seemed a bit flustered. Didn't have a good answer to anything. Didn't have that Jerome Powell swagger or confidence. Clearly is pulled between two things, which is the idea that, again, ignore the buttons on here. This is made by like a meme account. It's a little bit exaggerated. But the idea that like, hey, if we hyper cut, we're going to get inflation. It's going to come roaring back. If we don't cut fast enough, job losses keep rising. And we're like, this is the idea. He's stuck between these two worlds. Now, these actual numbers don't matter. It's going to matter more in the later cuts. But like, this is where we're at. And you could see that in this presser, dude. The dude just kept saying dual mandate, dual mandate, dual mandate. So interesting. And I'm glad the questions were pretty good this time. They did not let him just, shrug it off. They got him to say the word recession, which was wild. They also announced, if you're just tuning in, they announced the Switch 2 and Silk Song, day one. How about that? Stocks down? Really? On a rate cut announcement? Dow slips as Powell concludes. Well, give it a little bit. Although the market's about to close, right? That's different. That's different. Should rise on a rate cut announcement, especially a jumbo rate cut. That should be like gas. Interesting if they're sniffing out something in the fucking. They want a 100-point cut? No. Nobody. It was between 0.25 and 0.5. The market, as of like 3 days ago, was 50-50. 50-50 split. Anyway, not really much of a move. We'll check it out tomorrow. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. Should rise. I mean, realistically. 50 basis points, exclamation points. On what basis was the decision made? The market initially loved the move, but has since reversed backwards. Interesting. Well, you can't read too much into daily moves on stocks. It's all whipsaw. It's all been whipsawing. This past couple months has been like huge moves down, huge move up, huge move down, huge move up. This weird like push and pull between different ideals on the whole market. Anyway, that's Jerome Powell's presser. I wanted to watch it with you. I know it seemed a little boring if you're new to that stuff, but it's interesting. Some things he didn't mention, worth talking about. Chapter 11 filings just came in. They were unusually high. Unusually high. Second busiest weekend of the year for Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. Worth considering. couple other things. Well, I'll save some of this. Yeah. I saw this question. I kind of wanted to answer it. This is on value investing. Why would a rate cut cause a down market? Like, why would the market go down in response to a rate cut? And the answer is it shouldn't or wouldn't by itself. A rate cut is pretty much always good for stocks and the market. But the only thing is if they're cutting rates for a reason, like if they're cutting rates because there's a problem, then that problem might be too big for the rate cuts to stop, which is how it was in 01 and 07. So the idea is that if they're doing a rate cut because they're like, oh, shit's bad, then shit is bad, regardless of whether or not you cut the rates. I thought I'd just bring this question up because people have this. Tupperware filed for bankruptcy? Yeah, that's not a huge indicator. Tupperware filing for bankruptcy, I think the company was pretty mismanaged, right? My understanding is Tupperware was great and sold well, and then someone bought it out and they made it like cheaper and worse products for a long time, and all the old fans got mad. I don't know if that's like a particular indicator. If the U.S. goes through recession, does that affect other regions like EU and Asia? Man, in my mind, it's almost the reverse, bro. I feel like those markets are doing worse. I can't say I know about all of Asia, but I know about China and I know about most European countries. I know about Canada, I know about Australia. They're all like almost ahead of the curve on. Like Canada, especially, is like, look to them first. They're having these problems. They've already done their rate cuts and it didn't help. Do you see foreclosures doubling? Yeah, I mean the shit happening in Canada is bad, but Canada has a worse real estate market than us. Like they never even had a 07 bubble. You know what I'm saying? They never popped it. Imagine if 2007 happened, we got a recession, but house prices didn't even come down. They just kept them bubbled up, and Canada has never had a correction. They've blown the world's biggest real estate bubble like fucking ever. Not nominally because it's a small country compared to like China, but like in percentage wise, it's like absurd. Canada's absurd. Young people there just can't get a fucking house, bro. It's just not. It's beyond fucked. Australia pretty bad too, to be honest. Australia's entire economy is propped up on fucking dig rock out of ground, give to China, and keep increasing housing prices. Those are the two things. That and Bluey. The three, I'm sorry. What does soft landing mean? Soft landing is the idea that they're able to raise rates so rapidly. I'll show it like this, without causing any problems to the wider economy. They can just go right up to here, make borrowing money more expensive for housing, cars, credit cards, everything, and everything is fine. Everything goes great. Or you have a minor slowdown, a minor economic slowdown, but everything goes smoothly. And they may well have that. Again, my theory is that they won't, but they may well. In 1995, we had a soft landing. They rose rates. They did a small cut. Everything was fine. Soft landing, no problem. It wasn't until 01 we had a big recession. These shaded bars are recessions. 07, we had a recession. They couldn't raise it. There was no soft landing. If this is like 1995, then we'll have a soft landing. But, you know, there's a lot more parallels between 07 and 01 than 95 to me. But did you see another Intel L with the PS6 deal? This is kind of off topic, but I'll talk about it real quick just because I have a thought on this. This is how Intel lost the Sony PlayStation business. And they're like, Intel lost $6 billion because they could have made the chips for PS6. The truth is, I know this for a fact, making the chips for PlayStations is a shitty business. It's incredibly low margin. You make almost no money on it. It's incredibly demanding from them. They get all of the upside. This is not an L for Intel. Intel has plenty of L's. Nobody wants to do this. The only person that wants to do it is AMD because they're desperate. Making the chips for a console, they are constantly pushing you to make it as cheap as fucking possible. And they give you no upside because they want to make the console as cheap as possible so they can get it out and sell games. It's a terrible deal. Nobody wants to do it. Yeah, NVIDIA tried it. I don't want to go into too much personal details from the company, but NVIDIA tried it, hated it, got out. Okay, I've heard horror stories. I don't blame Intel for not wanting to take this deal. It's not as much, like they say revenue, right? $30 billion in revenue, but the costs are would be $29.9 billion or whatever. It's not a huge gain like you think. The only reason to do it is if the reason AMD does it, right, is not because of the money. It's because if consoles are made on AMD chips, that means when game developers are making games, they have to make sure they work well on AMD chips because they're in consoles. Do you understand? If AMD wasn't in consoles, no one would even fucking give a shit because AMD didn't have a big enough market share. So that's why they get in the console. I'm trying to give you a little context here. They have to do it because that's what keeps them relevant. If rate cuts are bellwethers for downturns, why are markets still up? It's not, first of all, it's not every time. As I mentioned, 1995. Secondly, rate cuts themselves are always good for markets because it's easier to borrow money. That means the economy should start to get a little juiced, right? Because people can borrow money to buy a car or buy a house or go on a credit card or go on a vacation or buy stocks on fucking margin. It should be good in general on its own. What the market is trying to suss out is why are you doing the rate cut? Because usually the reason for the rate cut is the problem. If the labor market is doing really bad and we're in an unemployment cycle, and that's why they're cutting rates, then that could be a much bigger problem than this little Band-Aid of the rate cut. The market is trying to suss that out. That's why all those questions were about the labor market. People are trying to figure out what's the problem here? Why are you doing this? Is it a big deal? And we don't know the answer to that yet, though I think there's a lot of strong evidence to indicate that we do have a serious consumer weakness at the lower end, and we have deteriorating credit conditions and unemployment. Is it good to graduate into a recession? You honestly asking that question? You can't figure that one out yourself? Yeah, man, it's great. It's considered the best thing. Ask millennials, dude. It fucking rules. It's awesome. Nothing cooler than it. Why do you use the term bellwether all the time these days? What do you want me to use? Canary in the coal mine? What do you want me to use? I don't know. It's the right word. It's a fucking indicator. We're talking about things that are where you'd want to use it. Is a recession like recess where we get some time to have fun? Yep, that's exactly what it's right. Yeah, exactly. Fucking true. Why does cutting rates help employment? Cutting rates, like I mentioned, I'm sorry to be repetitive, but just to make sure we understand, cutting rates makes it easier to borrow money, which juices the economy because everyone's going out to borrow money to buy things and do things. Okay? So if you are borrowing, or if you're using your credit card to go on a fucking trip to Disneyland, Disneyland has more customers. They hire people. If the economy's juiced, if you're buying cars or buying whatever, then people need to hire because the things are moving. Companies need to, they grow in response to that. So it should be good for employment is the idea. But again, this is a tiny rate cut. I mean, it's a jumbo rate cut for them, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not changing the world. And they've been high for a really long time. And the idea is the lag effect of being high for so long is going to kick in. And maybe much bigger than they are able to respond. Looking at the history, the plateau before the cuts is a far greater indicator. I don't know about a far greater indicator, but I do agree. That's why I showed this chart. This is how long they held at the high rate before cutting. And usually, when you hold for a really long time, it creates this lag effect that all hits, you know? Because I mean, everything in monetary policy has a lag effect. By the time this all comes crashing in, you can't cut fast enough. That's 06, 07. But again, different times. We could be in a 95 situation. This is a way different thing. What if people just don't pay the loans like people have been? It's a great question. That's what they're going to do. We don't know how that plays out if enough people don't pay their loans. People aren't paying their auto loans. There's a company called Ally Financial. Let's pull up their chart. Let's just pull it up. We'll go to Google right now. Ally Financial. Okay? Ally Financial shares plunge as lender says consumers are struggling with car loans. They said this a week ago. 1 week ago, they fucking crashed. They basically said, hey, whoops, all those car loans we made, people aren't paying them back. Okay? This is just one company, but understand that, like, these are the effects, the lag effects of high rates. Eventually, people can't make their payments because they're too high. Their mortgage payment's too high, their car payment's too high, their credit card payment's too high, and they've been living on credit, and these things catch up, especially as the student loans become a thing at the end of this month. So that will happen. Now, what it means, we don't know. We have to see how widespread it is, but it's clearly more of an issue than it was 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago, and so it's worth talking about. Is down 20% considered crashing? Down 20% in a day is horrendous. Horrendous. A day. If there's weakness in the lower end consumers and unemployment, lowering rates encourage more debt. Seems a terrible way to deal with it. You're getting into a really broad question, a larger term question about whether or not, I mean, this is like we could go back to the gold standard. You know, like you could go really broad on this, but I'm just telling you how it works in general, right? They lower the debt. It's easier to borrow. It makes it easier for the consumer to get loans and keep things moving. Will student loans coming back impact the election? I think they're legitimately, the date they picked was designed to help to help juice voters for the election. Like it's so funny. There's a moratorium on reporting it to credit agencies. Like you don't have to, if you're not paying your student loans, it won't be a problem until end of September this year. At which point everyone's like, wait, what the fuck? What the fuck? This sucks. I need to vote for whoever's going to cancel these. And then obviously Joe Biden and I guess now Harris have been like more on that train. So that might motivate a lot of people. But why is a rate cut a risk for increasing inflation? So, yeah. It is speeding up activity in the economy. If people are buying more things, the prices of the things will raise. So, for example, if getting a loan on a house is cheaper and easier, prices of houses will start to rise. There's more demand. More people are trying to compete for the same houses, and they can bid more because they can borrow more. The prices will rise. That's the idea. The reason they raised rates in the first place was to slow down inflation. It's a basic question, but I want to, answer it. Basic question, please skip. How do I 10 seconds forward on my video? All right, well, you can watch the VOD, buddy. Fucking banned. People are asking things, bro. People are trying to catch up. Fucking dipshit. What if I change my name on my student loans to Kamala Harris? Does that mean she has to pay for them? This is a little known loophole, but yes, this is actually true. If you put someone else's name on your student loans, they have to, you actually get that off your books. Don't tell anybody because this is a kind of a secret, but this does work. So just find the richest person you could think of, put it on, you could put it on Elon or put it on Jeff Bezos, and they have to pay them, and they hate that. They hate this one weird trick. Let's not put Brandon Ewing. Let's not put my name. Let's not do me. I don't think that would be good. I don't think I want to necessarily do that. All right, but if I'm paying your student loans, I'm also charging you a tuition check for this stream. So it'll, you know what? And it's dead even. It's dead even. So you're gonna you still owe. You still owe. Even if it's easier to borrow money, isn't there still the issue with high defaulting credit card rates and the student loan delinquency reports at the end of the month, leading to decreased ability to borrow from the consumer? Yeah, that is the issue I'm bringing up. That's what I'm talking about. Basically, my theory is that the problems that they are cutting the rates to solve are bigger than the Band-Aid. That this rate cut is not a big enough solution. That's the idea. But we don't know. We're going to find out, right? I think people would default on car loans less if average car loans were $800 a month. So, yeah, I mean, average car loans, I think, are a little bit higher than this. So you're saying if car loans were cheaper, people would default on them less. That's a really powerful statement. I never thought about it like that. Who's paying more than that a month? Dude, you would be surprised. The amount of people that have $1,000 plus, I've seen high as $3,300 a month. Dude had a Hummer, $100,000 Hummer, $3,300 a month. People are paying absurd amounts on their cars a month, especially people that bought during the COVID era boom on all this stuff. And of course, they're all defaulting. They can't make those payments. They can't make those payments with their old job, let alone, if there's higher unemployment. I can confirm this. I worked for Chase and saw this frequently. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, one cool thing about this. Can I tell something cool? I'll segue a little bit here because we have probably do a Marketing Monday tonight. I'll see. We'll talk about more of this stuff tonight. I'm not gonna keep streaming for much longer. I'm going to end here in a second. But people that work in these industries DM me. It's cool. I've gotten like some inside looks at someone who worked at the National Association of Realtors. I've gotten some inside looks at people that work at different various banks. It's cool. And I ask them questions, and it helps me get a more concrete picture of things people are seeing. And then, of course, I insider trade. Do you think the rate cut will affect my dad's anger issues? Does he get mad about money? Because it could be bad luck for you. Were car loan defaults also happening in 2007 and 8? I don't know. I think I have the date on top of my head of car loan defaults in 07, 08. But, the idea behind going into different recessions is that in the easy money time beforehand, debt gets overextended in a variety of ways. In 07, 08, the big thing was subprime housing loans. Debt got overexpended on housing. And then when that finally came down, there was a problem. What people call this time is like the everything bubble, because it feels like debt got overextended, not just in housing, but in autos, in credit cards, in a variety of ways, in commercial real estate, in private equity, and so we don't. But all of them are relatively, holding. So we don't know. It doesn't seem to be concentrated in one area.